Mei Lin stood alone in the bridal suite as dawn light filtered through sheer curtains. The silence felt too heavy, pressing against her chest as she clutched a worn photograph of her mother. 8 years gone now, but the promise she'd made at her mother's bedside remained unbroken. Find happiness, but never forget who you truly are, her mother had whispered. The modest hotel room contrasted sharply with what Mei knew the Anderson family expected, but she'd insisted on simplicity. No one understood why, no one knew what she'd promised her mother. Not even James, her fiancé, knew the full truth. She traced her mother's smile in the photograph with her fingertip, remembering their tiny apartment above the laundromat, her mother working double shifts while studying English at night. "Today, Mom," she whispered, "I fulfill my promise." Outside, she could hear bridesmaids arriving, their laughter echoing down the hallway. Mei carefully tucked the photograph into a small velvet pouch and took a deep breath. She'd spent 5 years living modestly as a kindergarten teacher, honoring her mother's belief that true character is revealed when nobody knows your worth. Today would change everything. God, did you see her shoes yesterday? Target clearance, I swear. The voice of Vanessa, James's sister, carried clearly through the thin walls. Mei froze by the door, hand resting on the handle. "I don't understand what James sees in her," chimed in Brittany, the second bridesmaid and James's cousin. Besides the obvious exotic appeal, their laughter stung, but Mei had grown accustomed to their whispered criticisms. "Mother says she's probably after the family money," Vanessa continued, unaware that Mei could hear every word. As if teaching kindergarten pays for anything. More laughter. Mei felt the familiar ache in her chest. Not from their cruelty, but from the loneliness of carrying her secret. She'd met James at a charity fundraiser for children's literacy where she'd volunteered. He'd loved her passion for education, her kindness, never questioning her modest lifestyle. But his family had investigated her background, finding only what she'd allowed them to see: daughter of Chinese immigrants, scholarship student, dedicated teacher. A single tear escaped before she quickly wiped it away. She squared her shoulders and pushed the door open, greeting them with a warm smile that revealed nothing of what she'd overheard. "Darling, those are interesting shoes." Eleanor Anderson, James's mother, knelt to inspect Mei's simple cream heels purchased from a thrift store. The woman's designer suit probably cost more than Mei's entire wedding outfit. At least that's what Eleanor wanted everyone to believe. "We could have gotten you something more appropriate. The photographer will capture everything, you know." Her perfectly manicured finger traced the slightly scuffed heel with thinly veiled disgust. The bridesmaids exchanged knowing smirks behind Eleanor's back. Mei simply smiled, the kind of smile that came from knowing something others didn't. "They fit me perfectly, thank you. My mother always said comfortable feet make for a happy bride." Eleanor's eyebrows arched slightly at the mention of Mei's mother, the laundry worker who had died of cancer, or so the Anderson family had been told. Not entirely untrue, her mother had indeed passed from cancer, but the rest of her story remained carefully guarded. Eleanor stood, brushing invisible dust from her knees. "Well, I suppose we can Photoshop them if necessary." Mei nodded politely, feeling the weight of the jade pendant hidden beneath her dress. Her mother's last gift, bearing the ancient Zhang family crest that no one in this room would recognize, save for the right circles. "To our son's bride-to-be." Richard Anderson raised his mimosa glass during the rehearsal brunch, his boisterous voice commanding attention across the restaurant's private room. "James is certainly helping you upgrade in life, isn't he?" Polite laughter rippled through the gathering of family and friends. "We'll have to take you shopping once you're officially an Anderson." Can't have a teacher's salary limiting your wardrobe anymore. The joke landed with practiced precision, seemingly generous while subtly reminding everyone of the perceived class difference. James shifted uncomfortably beside May but said nothing, his silence a familiar betrayal. Under the table, May's fingers tightened around her napkin, the only outward sign of her discomfort. 5 years of building her life in America independently, of honoring her mother's wishes to experience life without the weight of their family name and fortune had taught her patience. The Zhang Technologies empire could buy and sell Anderson real estate 10 times over, but that knowledge remained her private strength. When all eyes turned to her, expecting embarrassment or excessive gratitude, May simply offered a quiet, enigmatic smile that revealed nothing yet somehow unsettled Eleanor across the table. Later, alone in the bathroom, May allowed herself 10 seconds to close her eyes and breathe deeply before returning to the table, her composure intact but a new resolve hardening within. When everyone had left for the evening events, May locked the door to her suite and carefully removed a small velvet box from a hidden compartment in her suitcase. The deep red velvet bore a golden monogram, a stylized Z intertwined with a traditional Chinese character. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it, revealing an ancient jade signet ring bearing the Zhang family crest. The same one etched into the multinational corporation's logo, though few would make the connection between the kindergarten teacher and the tech conglomerate that had revolutionized quantum computing. Tomorrow, she would wear this ring. Tomorrow, everyone would know. Her mother had insisted on this arrangement that May live normally until marriage, learning the value of life without the weight of billions. Find someone who loves you, not your inheritance, she had said. May had honored that wish, even as it meant enduring the Andersons' subtle and not-so-subtle jabs. She returned the ring to its box and locked it away, then sat at the window overlooking the city lights. Softly, she hummed a Chinese lullaby her mother used to sing, finding strength in the melody as she prepared herself for what was to come. The wedding would proceed exactly as planned, until it didn't. I've made some adjustments to the seating chart, Eleanor announced the next morning, not bothering to look up from her tablet as May entered the hotel's planning room. We've moved your former colleagues to table 18, near the kitchen. She flicked her manicured finger across the screen. It's better this way. The Hamiltons and Prestons should be closer to the main table, given their standing. What Eleanor meant was clear. May's kindergarten co-workers and childhood friends didn't belong near the important guests. May noticed her own aunt and uncle, her only attending relatives, who everyone believed were simply family friends who had helped after her mother's death, had been relegated to the furthest table, labeled friends and staff. The deliberate slight might have hurt months ago, but now May only felt a calm certainty about her decision. Of course, she replied evenly, though I would prefer if my aunt and uncle could be seated closer. Eleanor's smile tightened. Darling, space is so limited near the family tables. They'll understand. May simply nodded, knowing that tomorrow those same tables would witness a revelation that would leave Eleanor speechless. The seating chart would be the least of the conversations. Who's Mr. Zhang? Vanessa's voice cut through May's thoughts as she returned from stepping outside to take a private call. The bridesmaid stood with arms crossed, suspicion clear in her narrowed eyes. I heard you speaking Chinese. Sounded pretty intense for wedding day talk. May calmly slipped her phone into her purse, maintaining the composed expression that had become her armor. Just finalizing some details, she replied vaguely. In truth, she'd been speaking with her family's chief financial officer, confirming that the required documents would be delivered to the ceremony as planned. The Zhang family attorneys had been explicit about the timing. Her inheritance and control of the company would transfer officially upon her marriage, as stipulated in her mother's will. Didn't sound like details to me, Vanessa pressed, stepping closer. James mentioned you've been taking these mysterious calls for weeks. Getting cold feet? Or is there something else going on? The accusation hung in the air between them. Other bridesmaids had stopped their preparations to listen. The room suddenly silent except for the distant sounds of venue setup. May met Vanessa's gaze steadily. "I assure you, everything will be clear very soon." Her calm certainty seemed to unnerve Vanessa more than any defensive response would have. The bridesmaid retreated, but May could see the suspicion had only deepened. "We need to talk." James cornered May in the hallway, his usual warm expression replaced by worry. "Vanessa told me about the call. Who is Mr. Zhang? What aren't you telling me?" The hurt in his eyes was genuine, and for a moment, May considered telling him everything right then. But her mother's instructions had been clear. The revelation came after vows, not before. Their love had to be sealed before fortune entered the equation. "James, I promise there's nothing for you to worry about." "Do you trust me?" she asked, taking his hands in hers. He hesitated just a fraction of a second, but enough for her to notice. "Of course I do, but these secrets, it's not like you. And my parents are asking questions too." The mention of his parents hardened something in May's chest. For 5 years she had endured their judgment, their assumptions about her background and worth. She had watched James falter in defending her countless times, choosing peace over confrontation. After the ceremony, she said firmly, "Everything will make sense. Can you trust me until then?" He searched her face, conflict evident in his expression. "I do trust you," he finally said, but the seed of doubt had been planted. As he walked away, May wondered if their relationship would survive tomorrow's truth and whether she still wanted it to. "This was my grandmother's," Eleanor announced, holding up a yellowed lace veil with obvious pride. 7 generations of Anderson brides have worn it. The statement was delivered like a royal decree as they gathered in the bridal preparation room. May had already arranged for her own veil, a modern, elegant piece that complemented her simple dress, but Eleanor continued before she could respond. "I know you probably had something else in mind, but this is tradition." The implication was clear: accept it or reveal yourself as unworthy. "And honestly, dear, it will save you quite a bit." Wedding budgets can spiral so easily when you're not used to managing larger finances. The condescension was wrapped in a veneer of helpfulness that fooled no one. The bridesmaids watched the exchange with barely concealed anticipation of conflict. May studied the veil, beautiful in its way, but heavy with an obligation she had no intention of accepting. Still, making a scene now would only detract from tomorrow's revelations. With steady hands, she accepted the veil, nodding with calm precision that clearly unsettled Eleanor, who had expected either pathetic gratitude or awkward resistance. "Thank you for offering this piece of your family history," May said simply. She would decide in the morning whether to actually wear it. While May was being fitted for last-minute dress alterations, Brittany slipped into the bridal suite, eyes darting around for signs of anyone watching. Something about May's calm demeanor despite the family's treatment had sparked her curiosity and suspicion. Carefully opening May's suitcase, she rummaged through neatly packed items until her fingers struck something solid, a hidden compartment. Inside, she found several documents in protective sleeves. Share certificates with the Zhang Technologies logo, one of the world's largest tech conglomerates, and May's name clearly printed as majority shareholder. Brittany's breath caught. She'd seen the company featured in Forbes just last month. This couldn't be right. Before she could investigate further, voices approached in the hallway. She hastily shoved everything back, not noticing as one document slid beneath the suitcase lining. When May returned moments later, she found Brittany pretending to admire the wedding dress hanging by the window. Without a word, May walked to her suitcase, opened it, and snapped the hidden compartment shut with precise, deliberate movements. Their eyes met in the mirror, Brittany's wide with confusion, May's calm and knowing. "Was there something you needed, Brittany?" she asked quietly. The bridesmaid mumbled an excuse and fled, her discovery burning in her mind. As night fell on the eve of her wedding, May allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Her thoughts drifted to childhood memories. Her mother's gentle guidance despite their extraordinary wealth, insisting May volunteer at soup kitchens even as their company soared on the stock market. She remembered sorting scholarship applications for underprivileged students while her classmates shopped for designer clothes. "Wealth without compassion is just money," her mother would say, but wealth guided by understanding becomes power for change. Those lessons had shaped her decisions after her mother's death. To honor the stipulation that May live modestly until marriage, experiencing life without the shadow of billions. She had chosen education as her path, finding fulfillment in shaping young minds. When she met James at that charity event, his genuine interest in her work had seemed refreshing after years of being pursued for her family name in Hong Kong and Shanghai. Now, staring at the ceiling, she wondered if she had been naive. Would James have approached the unassuming kindergarten teacher if he'd known who she really was? Would his family's treatment have been different? The questions circled in her mind as she drifted toward sleep, the weight of tomorrow's revelations heavy on her heart. "We've received an unexpected RSVP," Richard Anderson announced during the final venue walkthrough, frowning at his phone. "Lawrence Chun, CEO of Global Investments, has apparently confirmed his attendance." "Eleanor, did you invite him?" Eleanor looked equally perplexed, her social climbing instincts immediately activated by the mention of the billionaire financier. "I sent courtesy invitations to several business contacts, but I never expected Chun to actually attend. He rarely appears at these functions." The Andersons exchanged excited glances, already calculating the networking opportunities. May kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. Lawrence was her godfather and her family's closest business ally. His attendance could only mean one thing. The Zhang family board members were making their presence known ahead of the official announcement. "How wonderful," she said mildly. "Perhaps he knows someone in the wedding party." Richard laughed dismissively. "Doubtful. More likely he's scouting our downtown development project. I'll make sure he's seated with the Hamiltons." May bit back a smile. Tomorrow, the true connections would become clear to everyone, and the Andersons' carefully constructed social hierarchy would crumble like a house of cards. "My lawyer insists we discuss this before tomorrow," Richard said, sliding a document across the table toward May. The prenuptial agreement was thick, bound in expensive leather as if its presentation could soften its purpose. They sat in the empty hotel restaurant, James beside his father looking uncomfortable but resolute. Eleanor stood behind them, arms crossed. "It's standard protection, nothing personal," Richard continued, his tone suggesting it was very much personal. "Given the disparity in assets, I'm sure you understand." May looked at the document without touching it, then raised her eyes to meet James's. "Do you want this?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, glancing at his father before answering. "It's just business sense, May. It doesn't change how I feel." Something shifted inside her at his words. Not anger, but clarity. "Trust flows both ways," she said simply, pushing the document back without opening it. "I decline." Richard's face flushed. "This isn't optional if you want to marry into this family." May stood, smoothing her skirt with steady hands. "Then perhaps we should reconsider tomorrow's ceremony altogether." The ultimatum hung in the air as she walked out, leaving them staring after her. For the first time since arriving, May felt completely certain about what tomorrow would bring. Candlelight flickered across the cathedral's soaring arches during the rehearsal, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with ancient secrets. May stood at the entrance, watching as the wedding party took their positions at the altar. The organist played softly, the music reverberating through the vast space with an almost ominous quality. James waited at the front, stealing glances back at her with a mixture of love and lingering confusion from their earlier confrontation. The velvet box now rested in her purse, where tomorrow it would be transferred to her bouquet, the final piece of her mother's plan. As May took her position to practice the processional, she felt the weight of the moment pressing down. Tomorrow, every person in this cathedral would witness a truth 5 years in the making. The chandelier lights flickered momentarily as if the building itself sensed the coming revelation. Eleanor, micromanaging the flower arrangements, failed to notice how the visiting dignitary, who had arrived early for the rehearsal, bowed slightly to May as she passed. The gesture did not escape Vanessa's attention, however, her suspicious gaze following May down the aisle. With each step toward the altar, May left behind another piece of her constructed identity, moving steadily toward the moment when pretense would fall away completely. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather and impeccable timing. May stood before the cathedral doors in her elegant but understated gown, the simplicity of its design masking the fortune it had cost. She had ultimately declined Eleanor's ancestral veil, wearing instead a delicate crystal hairpiece that had belonged to her own grandmother. As the music swelled and the doors swung open, she caught sight of the unexpected guests filling the left side of the cathedral: Qizhang Technologies board members, family friends, and business associates who had flown in overnight, their presence still unnoticed by the oblivious Anderson family. She began her walk down the aisle, her heart steady despite the magnitude of what was to come. At the halfway point, Eleanor stepped slightly into the aisle, adjusting May's train with practiced hands. "Remember where you came from," she whispered, the words meant to humble but landing with unintended irony. May met her future mother-in-law's eyes calmly. "I never forgot," she replied softly, continuing her walk toward James. His smile seemed genuine, if tinged with nervousness after yesterday's tension. As she reached him, taking his hands at the altar, the officiant began the ceremony that would change everything. The velvet box rested in her bouquet, waiting for the perfect moment. "Before we exchange vows," May said clearly, her voice carrying through the cathedral just as the officiant prepared to begin, "there's something I need to share." A murmur rippled through the guests as she reached for her bouquet, extracting the velvet box. James watched with confusion as she opened it, revealing the ancient jade ring bearing the Zhang family crest. Recognition dawned instantly on the faces of those who moved in global financial circles, including Lawrence Chin, who now stood with a subtle nod of encouragement. "This ring belonged to my mother, Li Wei Zhang, founder of Zhang Technologies." The gasps were audible as May slipped the ring onto her right hand, its emerald stone catching the light. Per her final wishes, "I have lived independently these past 5 years, with my identity protected until my wedding day." The official standing nearby handed her an envelope, which she opened to reveal the certification of her inheritance. The documents transferring controlling interest of a company valued at $8.7 billion. The Anderson family stood frozen in shock, Eleanor's face draining of color as the truth became clear. "My mother believed that character is revealed when people don't know your worth," May continued, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting among the guests. "I have learned that lesson well." Stunned silence filled the cathedral as realizations spread like wildfire through the congregation. Business titans who had ignored May earlier now stood in recognition, while the Andersons remained paralyzed by the revelation. Photos of Li Wei-zhang, the visionary founder who had revolutionized quantum computing before her untimely death, appeared on several guests' phones as they confirmed what seemed impossible. The modest kindergarten teacher was indeed the Zhang heiress, one of the wealthiest women in Asia whose privacy had been fiercely protected by her family's influence. James stared at May with an expression of disbelief and dawning comprehension, his earlier doubts now cast in a damning light. "I came to America to honor my mother's wish that I experience life beyond privilege," May explained, her voice carrying in the hushed space. "I found purpose in teaching. I found friends who valued me without knowing my name." Her eyes met James's directly. "And I thought I had found love uncomplicated by wealth." She turned to face him fully, removing her engagement ring and holding it out. "Now you have a choice to make, knowing the full truth. Marry me for love or walk away. The choice and the world are watching." James stood frozen at the altar, the weight of his decision visible in his stunned expression. Behind him, Richard and Eleanor exchanged panicked glances, their social calculations visibly recalibrating with each passing second. The cathedral remained silent except for the occasional camera click from guests unable to resist documenting the moment. After what felt like an eternity, James stepped forward, taking May's hands in his. "I fell in love with a kindergarten teacher who laughed with her whole heart and stayed up late making special projects for children who needed extra attention," he said, his voice unsteady. "I don't know this person you're revealing now." He glanced at his parents, then back at May. "I need time to understand if we've been real or if I've been part of some test." He gently placed her engagement ring in her palm, closing her fingers around it. The rejection was public, final, and in its own way honest. May nodded once, dignity intact despite the gasps and whispers now spreading through the cathedral. "Thank you for your honesty," she said quietly. Without another word, she turned and walked back down the aisle alone, head held high, the Zhang family crest gleaming on her right hand. Lawrence Chen and several board members followed her exit, forming a protective entourage as she left behind the life she had built and the family that had never truly accepted her. Camera flashes exploded as May emerged from the cathedral, news of the dramatic revelation having spread instantly through social media. The once private teacher now stood revealed as one of the world's wealthiest heiresses, and the press had descended like vultures. "Ms. Zhang, was this a planned humiliation?" shouted one reporter. "Did James Anderson know your true identity?" called another. Through the chaos, May spotted the Anderson family attempting to leave through a side exit, pursued by their own media storm. Eleanor caught her eye across the crowd, the woman's expression a complex mixture of horror and calculation. With cameras recording every moment, Eleanor reluctantly approached, Richard and James following with obvious reluctance. "Ms. Zhang, we had no idea," Eleanor began, her voice honeyed with sudden respect. "If there were any misunderstandings," May raised a hand, silencing the fumbling apology. "There were no misunderstandings," she said clearly, her voice captured by dozens of microphones. "You showed me exactly who you are when you thought I had nothing to offer but myself." The statement, delivered with calm certainty rather than anger, rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's face flushed crimson as she realized their treatment of May would become as viral as the heiress revelation itself. Without waiting for further conversation, May turned and walked to the waiting limousine where Lawrence Chen held the door open with a proud smile. 3 months later, May slipped off her heiress ring and placed it carefully on her nightstand. She had just concluded her first board meeting as chairwoman of Zhang Technologies, announcing a new education initiative that would fund early childhood programs in underserved communities. The business world had embraced her as her mother's daughter, brilliant, compassionate, and formidable. Her phone buzzed with another interview request about the wedding that wasn't, but those held little interest now. Instead, she reached for the pair of simple cream heels from the thrift store, smiling at the memory they represented. She had kept them as a reminder of lessons learned and strength discovered. Sliding her feet into them, she walked to the window of her penthouse, gazing out at the city lights below. "Worth isn't what you inherit," she whispered, echoing her mother's favorite saying. "It's what you withstand." The journey had cost her a relationship but gained her something more valuable: unshakable self-knowledge. The shoes might be considered cheap by some standards, but they had carried her through one of life's most defining moments with grace and dignity. That made them priceless. If you enjoyed this story about standing firm in your worth and the sweet taste of karmic justice, please like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us all that true character shines even when no one's watching. Share with a friend who needs to remember their value isn't determined by others' opinions, and comment below, would you have forgiven the Anderson family, or was May right to walk away with her head held high?